Okay, it looks like we're live. I'd like to say thank you for joining us for today's talk from MindCORE at the University of Pennsylvania. My name is Heather Calvert, and I'm the Executive Director for MindCORE. Our seminar series this year is focused on big unanswered questions about the mind. And today we are joined by Michael Tomasello from Psychology and Neuroscience at Duke, and he will be introduced by MindCORE's Faculty Director, Joe Cable. A recording of this talk will be available shortly after we end the session. And one other housekeeping matter is please use the Ask a Question feature at the bottom right of your screen to post questions for our speaker. And Joe will keep his eye on those and we'll ask them at the end of the talk. You are also welcome to peruse the questions that have been posted there, and you can upvote questions to make sure that they're asked at the end of the talk. And then just one little final piece is that Nick Chater from the Warwick School of Business will be joining us next week for our final talk of this semester, and then this series will resume in February of next year. If you follow us at the MindCORE button above, then you will learn when the new talks are posted. So I will now turn it over to Joe Cable. Joe.
Thanks, Heather. I'm extremely pleased to be able to introduce our speaker for today's seminar, Mike Tomasello. He is the former co-director of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology and is currently a professor in psychology and neuroscience at Duke. His research is really amazing, and it takes an interdisciplinary approach to understand the development and evolution of social cognition, social cooperation, social communication, drawing from methods in developmental psychology and comparative psychology and linguistics and evolutionary anthropology. It couldn't be a better example of the kind of work that we're trying to highlight with this seminar series. His accomplishments are so numerous that I can only really perceive them with the approximate number system. So he's trained dozens of students who now have their own academic careers, published hundreds of papers, won innumerable awards, most recently being inducted into the National Academy of Sciences and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And he's written, by my count, 9 books, the most recent of which is Becoming Human, A Theory of Ontogeny, and that is what he's going to tell us about today. So thanks, Mike, for joining us.
So thank you very much. Let me do my screen share here. Okay, we had some issues setting up, so could you please let me know that this is okay? You can see the full screen?
Yeah,
it's good.
Full screen.
Okay, great. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. I was at the University of Pennsylvania some years ago at the invitation of Robert Seyfarth and Dorothy Cheney, and I'm very happy to be back. I understand that your series is about something, I think she said something like big unanswered questions. Well, okay, that's my wheelhouse. And I guess I would say it this way. My colleagues and I, for the last few decades, have been trying to zero in on, identify what aspects of human psychology are unique to the species. We have done that with comparative experiments with human children and great apes. And the puzzle is this, the way I would present it is this, that humans are great apes, and we differentiated from other great apes, namely chimpanzees and bonobos, around 6 million years ago. So we are as close to chimpanzees and bonobos in terms of evolutionary time and in terms of genetics. We're as close as lions are to tigers, as horses are to zebras, and rats are to mice. So these other pairs are different. Of course, they're different. They're different species, but their psychologies would seem to be in the same ballpark. And so the puzzle is that humans have developed some unique things that other great apes have not. We've developed complex technologies, we've developed complex symbol systems, and we've developed complex social and cultural institutions. And other great apes don't have anything that's sort of even in the ballpark for these kinds of things. So the puzzle is what could possibly have happened in evolution. And my argument has been that a new process entered into that, and that is the process of cultural evolution. And I think the biological story, very, very brief and simplified, is that whereas great apes' lives are mainly centered around competition, so they are, as individuals, individually intentional. They're intentional agents. They think. They are intelligent in every way. But what happened with humans was two further steps where involving humans putting their heads together to do things that neither could do alone. And I'm not going to elaborate here, but the two steps that I have sort of hypothesized is collaboration first, which is putting your head together with one other individual to collaborate. For example, in collaborative foraging, we call that joint intentionality. We have a shared goal. We have meshing plans to work out the shared goal. And then the second step is that scaled up to a whole cultural group. So collaboration scales up to culture. Culture, you can think of a culture as one huge collaborative group where we're all working for one another's benefit with kind of collective goals and so forth. And I want to talk to you today about ontogeny. And what we know is that anything that evolves, any adaptation in evolution is going to manifest itself in ontogeny. And that's where it comes out, is in a changed ontogeny. And what we can see in humans is that if we think about those great accomplishments of the human species that I outlined, complex institutions, complex symbol systems, complex technologies, this other process is cultural evolution. And this comes in that second step that I mentioned, after collaboration, culture. And this is mainly probably with modern humans. The other step of collaboration is probably before the emergence of modern humans. And what we have then is that individual human beings undergo their ontogeny. They inherit not only their biological capacities from evolution. So if you see down at the bottom here, this is the evolution of the species, and the individual inherits the capacities that have evolved in its species. But you also inherit, obviously in a different way, but you inherit your culture. You are born into a culture with certain ways of doing things, with symbol systems that are already set, with cultural practices and institutions that are already there before you come. So the individual, and those are on the level of the cultural group. So you have three time frames and three levels of analysis: the evolution of the species, the history of the cultural group, and the development of the individual. And the individual it's dual inheritance theory that was first formulated by Boyd and Richardson, and I've sort of borrowed it and adapted it for my own uses. So now what we want to do, the way I contextualize my research for this bigger question of what makes humans unique, is we should be able to see these things. We should be able to see these biological adaptations for living a cultural life. I said humans inherit their culture, but you only inherit your culture if you have the biological capacities for absorbing culture, whatever term you want to use there. We raise our pets in our home. They're in a culture, but they're not absorbing it the way that our children are absorbing it. So we want to look at the evolution of capacities for being a collaborative and ultimately a cultural being. And then the ontogeny is how those capacities unfold maturationally, and how the culture and how the absorbing of the culture then with those capacities turns human cognition and social life into something different from that of other apes. So the first thing to note is that you can already see that human ontogeny as a whole is very different from that of other great apes. This is the growth of the percentage of adult brain size over age. Now, I got to emphasize, the human brain is roughly 3 times larger than that of other great apes. This graph corrects for that. Okay, this graph is within your species. This is the percentage of growth of the brain over ontogeny. And what you can see is that chimpanzees start out at birth with around 50% of adult brain size, and by age 2, they have about 90% of adult brain size. And with human children, it's less than 20% at birth, and at age 2, it's only 50%, and it's not 90% until age 7 or 8. So everything has slowed down, and most people who have tried to explain this life history pattern have obviously invoked culture. Humans have so many things they have to learn to become members of a culture that you've got to slow things down, and the brain is developing as human children are acquiring all of the particularities of their particular culture. Just to emphasize not only brain growth but behavior, when the great apes, when they wean, they immediately are responsible for feeding themselves, and they're on their own. And that's one of the things that allows humans to develop so slowly, is that they are provisioned with food by adults well into adolescence. So studies of hunter-gatherers by Kim Hill and others have shown that in hunter-gatherer groups, individual children don't bring in as much food as they consume until the middle of adolescence. And in modern societies, it's even later than that. I assume some of you have teenagers who still have the credit card like I do. Okay, so in my book, Becoming Human, I tried to give an ontogenetic account that was sensitive to this biological background, that was contextualized in the biological background. So what you see in this graph is the 9-month revolution that I've been studying for several decades now. Something special happens with human children at around 9 months of age, and I'm going to get to that. Joint intentionality is the term I used back talking about evolution. I use that here. So somewhere around 9 months or a year. And the second culture, go back to the evolution slide, the emergence of capacity for culture emerges at around 3 years. Yes, children are immersed in a culture, immersed in a culture prior to age 3, but at age 3 they start understanding things like conventions and institutions and fairness norms, social norms, and so forth. So age 3 is when they become really active members of cultural groups by learning these special kinds of social structures. And what I do in the book is go through 8 different domains of development uniquely, and everything is just focused on what is unique about human ontogeny. So I'm not looking at things that we share with other species. So uniquely human social ontogeny, collaboration, a certain form of collaboration, certain form of prosociality, certain form of social norms, moral identity, and in cognitive ontogeny, social cognition, communication, cultural learning, and cooperative thinking. So what I want to do today is I'm going to focus mainly on the younger children and try to see and show you the the difference between the way human children interact with others and the way great apes do. And then the theoretical leap is what that means for all kinds of things. So the 9-month revolution, shared intentionality, you heard me use the term joint intentionality and collective intentionality. The larger term is shared intentionality. That covers all of it. We're putting our heads together. Joint intentionality is about collaborating with another individual. Collective intentionality is collaborating, as it were, with the entire cultural group. So at around 9 months of age, let me show you what starts happening in human infants. Now, on the far left here, this is me with my daughter. I get a little overexcited, sorry about that, but it was her 9-month birthday. And I said to the older sibling, get the camera and let's see what happens at 9 months. And here was the result. Now, we're going to roll the ball back and forth in collaboration. And what I want you to also look at is where she's looking. So she's not just concerned with the ball, she's concerned with us interacting with the ball. Watch, she rolls it back. Whoops, rolls it back. I'm very excited. Oh my God, here we are on the 9-month birthday. We've got this collaborative activity with joint attention going on. She looks to the eyes. We're not only collaborating in the activity, we're sharing our experience of it at the same time. And now she looks up at the face again. Okay, so that's the structure of the interaction. It's what we call triadic. It's why it's called shared intentionality. Is it's not just you and me sharing our feelings with one another. It's not just we hug and kiss and love one another. We are relating to some third entity. She and I are sharing our experience about the ball game. Okay, in communication, you can see something. This is very simple. This happens very, very fast, so you have to watch this very quickly. But in communication, you can see something where the children are motivated not just to get things by communicating, but this. Now watch. Okay, this is a very common behavior of children around 9 months to a year. They're just showing something. This child doesn't want the father to do anything with it. He doesn't want anything. He just wants to say, "Isn't this cool?" And the father's supposed to say, "Yeah, cool," and that's it. That's what we're, okay. Now you may think this is a little baby behavior, but I would say it scales up ultimately to human gossip. You know, this is what a lot of our communication is about. Is we just say to somebody, "Did you see that ball game last night? You know, did you hear the most outrageous thing Trump said lately? Did you hear who's dating whom?" We just gossip. We just talk about things and share them, and we are motivated to share, and it gives us pleasure to share things with other people. That's what social media and Wikipedia, that's what they're all about, is sharing. All right, and finally, here's joint attention. That is the classic book reading, and mom is going to point to some things, and the kid is going to point also. But again, watch. The kid isn't just interested in the book, but interested in mom's reaction to the book. So the kid is going to look back. Now, see, check out mom. Okay, see, we're looking at this together. And then the kid points. And then she says something roughly like baby. And then everybody's excited about that too. Okay, so this is the nature of the interaction of children, of young human infants with their caregivers and with others before they've even gotten to language, before they've gotten to cultural institutions, before they've gotten to any of that. This is a new way of engaging with others that you don't see in apes. Now, I'm just going to let this run. This is now, it's got one break in it, but basically this is a human-raised chimpanzee interacting with her caregiver. She's around 3 years old, and they're playing with the same kinds of toys that the child did. Let me just run it and I'll sort of talk over. She's got the ball, okay? And the caretaker is showing her what to do with the ball, and then she says, "Hand it to me." I said, "Hand it to me." She bounces it, trying to engage a game. The chimp is interested in the ball for sure, but she's not interested in collaborating or engaging in the game. She's interested in playing with the ball herself. Okay, so she's putting things in things. You know, these are all things that human infants do also, but human infants do that too. But now there's the break. Now we're going to do book reading. And the chimp, this is Annette. Annette is very interested in the book. She's looking in a fascinating way, but she's not looking back at the caretaker. She's not sharing experience with the caretaker. She's looking at the book. Okay, and then finally, very briefly here, right, so she's interested in the book as a physical object. She's interested in this. She's not showing this. That was another break. And now she's going to look at the book herself. And again, she's very interested, but she doesn't point at pictures for her caretaker or anything in that direction. Okay, so this, for me, is the earliest ontogenetic emergence of a uniquely human way of relating to others. But it's not just, I don't just mean relating to others and forming new kinds of deep social relationships. I mean forming with one another the ability to do things together toward a shared goal and to share experience about it. The structure of that diagrammatically, you know, there's nothing special about this. It's just the way I think about it. Look at the three blue little boxes here. This is about the behavior involved. When we collaborate, we form a joint goal, and you have your role and I have my role. Now, this is why I call it dual level. I didn't emphasize that before, but when we collaborate, we have two things going on at once. We have our shared goal. You and I are hunting an antelope together, for example, but you have your role, you're chasing him, and I have my role. I've got the spear and I'm going to spear him or whatever. So we have both jointness going on and individual roles in the joint activity going on. So there's jointness and individuality all in one package. The green boxes are about attention. So this is the sharing experience. We are jointly attending to things relevant to our joint goal. We're both paying attention to, we're making sure that we both saw which direction the antelope went. If there's now an obstacle in the way, we look at one another and say, "Ooh, gosh, there's an obstacle in the way, we need to do something." But we each have our own perspective. You may be seeing it from one direction, I see it from another. You may have more knowledge about some aspects of it than I do. So we each have our own perspective. So again, we have both the jointness, the joint attention, the sharing experience, and the individual perspectives and experience that are also there at the same time. So this is really triadic, and this is the basic, what I call the shared intentionality schema, the dual level structure of sharedness and individuality. And the claim is this is uniquely human. It evolved in humans in order to perform collaborative activities together and ultimately to form cultural groups and work as a group. But this is sort of a schematic of what I think is the cognitive basis of everything. So what I'm going to do now for the rest of the time here is to show you some videos of our experiments where we compare humans and human children of various ages, but mainly below 3 years of age. All the children you see here will be below 3 years of age, except for one, I think. No, they're all 3 or below. Sorry, they're all 3 or below. And comparing them to apes. Now, this comparative method has many pitfalls that have been pointed out ad nauseum by other people in print and in reviews and whatnot. I'm going to skip over all that now. I'm happy to answer questions about it. But the idea is supposed to be that we are seeing these evolutionary adaptations emerge in human ontogeny. We're looking at the emergence of them, the way they have instantiated themselves in the human species. And we're comparing them to our nearest primate relatives, great apes. So let's look at communication. I don't know if Robert is here, but I'm going to talk about gestural communication, not vocal communication. But here's the kind of thing that I started out studying in great apes. This is going to be, she wants to go for a walk, and her mom is there, and she wants to induce her mom to go for a walk. And all I want you to notice here is how deliberate and intentional this looks. She's got a goal. She's pursuing her goal. She's doing flexibly. She wants to go for a walk. Mom is just sitting there. And, okay, notice she's just pulling her on. She's not physically dragging her. She's letting her know she wants to go for a walk. It's called an intention movement. I'm just doing the first part of it. So we've studied these in detail. We have an edited volume. I think these are intentional communication. They're flexible. They invent new ones when they need to. So this is really, I have my own view is that human language evolved first in the gestural modality coming from this kind of communication in apes, and the vocal modality and spoken language is only later. But that's another story. Here is the human version. This is now like the showing, but now it's just pointing. She just points to share attention. She doesn't want anything. She just says, "Look, isn't that cool?" And the father just looks and he's supposed to say, "Great, okay." And if you had a 9-month-old, if you were sitting down and they did that, your reaction almost certainly would be to look over and say, "Oh, go, great, yeah, okay." That's what she wants. That's all she wants. She doesn't want the object. She just wants you to share attention. Share enthusiasm about it. Share her enthusiasm about this thing. This is the showing again, the same one, just to emphasize again, this is the only motive. It's just to share. And at some point in human evolution, we had iconic gestures. And I believe iconic gestures are the transition from pointing as an act of triadic referential communication, which is unique to the species, but now this starts to have a symbolic component to it. I know that Lila is retired. I don't know if maybe she's looking in from her living room somewhere, but in any case, obviously she has shown in a lot of her work about the early emergence of these kinds of gestures, and then the conventionalization of them, even in children who don't acquire a spoken or a signed conventional language. So in any case, it's just to show you very quickly what emerges in normally developing children. This little girl knows how to operate this apparatus, and the puppet doesn't know. And this is going to happen also very quickly, and she's going to show him how to do it. Okay, I believe this is the earliest iconic gesture. The earliest iconic gesture is not depicting something like, but it's showing you with my body what you're supposed to do with your body. So my body and hand are modeling for you what you should do with your body and hand. Okay, so in communication, what you see from age 9 months to age 2 years, and I'm leaving language aside. Language obviously is the pinnacle of human communication. But even in things that are sort of comparable to chimps, because chimps gesture and they gesture in flexible and intentional ways, there's this new element coming in, which is its referentiality, its triadicness, its shared intentionality. I want you to see this thing, and my only motive is I want to share experience, and I'm directing you to it triadically. The ape's gestural communication is mainly about face-to-face interaction. So, this is where the first place where you can see, or this is one of the first places where you can see the emergence of this triadic shared way of operating. Collaboration. So I showed you the little video, and that gave you the feel for it. But we've also done experiments, and in this experiment, what we do is there's a toy inside. This child is 18 months. The children before in the previous one were 14 months, and I think the gesturers. So these are kids that are really just getting started in any productive language. And this is a kid. They know that there's a toy inside, and the experiment is that the adult, this is Felix Warneken, is going to be difficult, and we want to see how the child responds when the child enters this expecting collaboration, and he doesn't collaborate. What do they do? What does the child do? He goes quiet for 15 seconds. Now he's not doing his job, and the child goes, okay, re-engaging. Okay, I'm expecting collaboration. You're not doing your job. Okay, and she's telling him how to do it. He's telling Felix how to do his job. You grab it on the end there. So there's an expectation that we're collaborating, and I want to engage you in this to get back into it and collaborate. Now, in this particular task, they have to collaborate to be successful, but we also have tasks where either one of them can make something operate, and they kind of take turns doing it, and the child doesn't want to do it alone. They only want to do it if the other one does it in turn, because that's the game. And so they re-engage the adult into it, and you can see the kid is doing that. Take your in. He's silent for 15 seconds. That's the experiment. It's set, and now he comes back, and now they can pull it apart. And I'm not showing you the comparable thing in chimps, because with chimps, when we gave them that same thing, they would grab one side of it with their feet and one side with their hands and open it by themselves. And they didn't really care about collaborating. But here's a different one that just shows you the re-engagement process. So this is one where this chimp has to pull up the door, and then this adult human can reach in and grab some food. And again, she's gonna do her 15 not. Now you can see the chimp's a little frustrated because she's not reaching through, and the net again. She's kind of clearly not a human baby. And now the 15 seconds is going to end, and the human is trying to show that she's ready to open the door now. She's saying, "I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready." So 2 points. First of all, yes, they succeeded. They did collaborate. So there are some skills there. But the second is that what happened was the human handed over the food to the ape. So some people said to me, well, of course they don't collaborate with the human. That's the human they're collaborating with. They should be collaborating with one another. Well, you're going to see an example of that in a minute, but I'll just, a spoiler for you is that if 2 chimps do it, the one who reaches through and gets the food just eats it. So it doesn't become, the collaboration can't continue because they're not sharing the food. So yes, they have some skills, and here's where I'm going to get to it right here. All right, this is a little task that we borrowed from Hirata in Japan, and basically 2 chimps or children have to pull together for it to work. So you can see that the rope is sort of strung through these loops on the board, and if you pull by yourself, it just pulls through. This has a voiceover from it's a TV. All right, so she knows, she's had a little bit of practice, and she knows pulling the rope by herself is no good. She actually goes over and opens the door for the partner. We were absolutely blown away at this. And they together and they each get their. Okay, so now what I'm going to do to illustrate what we're going to do in this experiment, this is actually 2 experiments, one about opening the door and this one here about sharing the food and the TV, put them together. But now what we're going to do is we're going to put food in the center box. And so in the way this is now, we basically solved the problem for them of how to divide up the spoils. But now we're going to put it in the center box and see what happens. Okay, so you can imagine what happens in the next trial. In the next trial, the more dominant chimp, the one closest to us, just quits. There's nothing in it for me. So I actually believe that one of the key things is in human evolution was the ability to actively share spoils of a collaboration. If you can't do that, you can't keep going. So here's some children in a similar experiment. These are 4 gummy bears here in this middle box. I chose this video because this child is going to act like the chimp at the beginning, but he doesn't actually take them all. This child is going to comment they're not on my side, and then before he comes over, these are German children, and now comes over, starts to take more than 2. The other says no, and then just takes 2, leaves 2 for the other child. Okay. And these are 3-year-old children, and they almost always take 2 and only 2. And so they can do this all day long. And they even have a repair mechanism. They can do it as long as they have as many gummy bears as their parents will let them eat. They even have a repair mechanism. So if in this example, the first child, this is what we observed on almost every occasion, where one of them took more than their share, the other one said, hey, and the first one gave up until they had 2 and 2. So 3-year-olds can tell 2 and 2 is balanced, and anything other than 2 and 2 is not balanced, and they almost always balance it out. It's not just because they're super nice. If they were super nice, they'd let the other guy have 4. They're not doing that. They're doing it fairly so that we get the same. And actually, that was our hypothesis in something that in this study, which is my favorite study in this line, and the best data I ever got, which is they're going to collaborate here, and these are going to be marbles instead of gummy bears, and we rig it. Well, you'll see how we rig it. We rig it so that, whoops, 3 to one side and 1 to the other side. And he shares. We have a control condition. We actually have 2 control conditions, but the most straightforward control condition is they just come in the room, and without collaboration, it's 3 on one side and 1 on the other. When it's no collaboration, 3 on one side and 1 on the other, they share about 11% of the time or something. When they collaborate, as you saw here, one of them gives up, the lucky child, as we call them, gives up 1 so that they're equal, 2 and 2, 80-something% of the time. The distributions don't even overlap. So the title of this, and then with chimps, we did something similar. It's got to be rigged a little bit differently because they don't really hand over stuff that well, but we rigged it so that they either protected or didn't protect the extra 1. And they didn't care. The chimps didn't care whether we collaborated or not. It was irrelevant as whether they let the other guy get the extra 1. So the title of this paper was that collaboration facilitates equal sharing in children, but not chimpanzees. So we think this is at least indirect evidence that maybe collaboration is the home of a sense of fairness, of a sense of sharing equally, and that we each get what we deserve. And if we didn't collaborate, then I just get the 3, I'm lucky, you're unlucky. But if we collaborate, we each deserve an equal amount. In social and cultural learning, I know everybody has Zoom fatigue on long talks, so I'm not gonna speak that much longer, but I'll give you a couple more examples. But I'm gonna have to skip over a few things here. Try to keep it in time here. So one of the things that happens in social learning that's unique to humans is teaching. And what you can see here, and the counterpart of teaching is conformity on the part of the learner. So here, an adult is showing this little girl how to do this. Now, the natural way to turn this light on would be just touch it with your hand. But she does it with a ball. And so now it's going to be the child's turn. And there's a control condition where they don't see the ball. And of course, the ball is sitting there, but they'd use their hand. They just ignore the ball. But now she's using the ball, so she can conform to doing it exactly the way the adult does it. And in case that's not quite convincing enough for you, again, there's a control condition where the ball is just sitting there, but the adult didn't use it, and they don't think to use it on their own. And then here she does it a different way, even when the child still has the ball in her hand, and she now does it with her wrist, which is, again, not quite the normal way of doing it with your hand, and the child is doing it with her wrist. So, so another domain where this sort of unique cultural thing, this I would say is the human. To be a member of a culture, you have to conform to the culture's way of doing things, and this is what you see here. Is they're just and chimps don't conform, they don't teach, and they don't conform in this way. I'll show you a cute little funny example, because I know that fun examples. This is an adult showing her. Sorry, I did that. I started talking too soon. Wait, let me show you. This is the adult showing this child how to take rice from this. Now, see what she does there? And then she takes the rice and brings it over and puts it in the bucket. And now it's going to be the child's turn. Okay, this is what's called in literature over-imitation. And you can even ask the children afterwards sometimes, is it necessary for you to put your hands up like that? And they'll tell you no. But why are they doing it? Because that's the way you do this game. And this is a kind of a normativity. This is the normal, this is the way we do it. This is the way it's done. So this is, again, something from culture, that a lot of what happens in human cultures is that we do things the way that they are done in the group. I'm going to skip the thinking because that has some other it takes too long, but I'm just talking about collaborative thinking. And I guess if I'm addressing scientists, I don't need to tell any of you that all the most sophisticated thinking we do is in collaboration with others. How many of you have, started and executed and written up a scientific project on your own with no help from anybody? Probably none, ever. So, all of our most sophisticated thinking comes in collaboration with others. And I would argue that even though apes, what I was going to show you there was a little video of an ape doing some very clever things and what I would call thinking, considering possibilities, choosing the best one. But then the kids are discussing with one another what's the best thing to do and coming to a common solution. And that is a sharing of ideas that I don't think other apes do. And finally, an important part of human culture is social norms. That, again, this is the way we do things. And these are 3-year-old children. This is one of the major surprises that I've had in my research with children, is these 3-year-old children, they don't just follow cultural norms. It's sort of easy to see why you would follow cultural norms. You want to fit in, you don't want to be punished, et cetera, et cetera. But they enforce social norms. Again, just 3 years old now. And this is a game. The actual game is not important here. So you're not going to know the rules, but it doesn't matter. The point is, this little puppet is not playing the game the right way. Child is wrong. Okay. Okay, so importantly, the child is not playing the game. The child is an observer. So the child is not being adversely affected. They're not telling he's not telling the puppet, do it the right way because it's ruining the game for me. He's just saying you're not doing it the right way, full stop. Okay? And so this enforcement of social norms, cultural norms, I would say is an indication that the child after age 3 or so has internalized the social norms and thinks that this is what we do. And not only do I do it also, but I make sure that others do it as well. And that's part of what becoming an active member of the culture means, is what a lot of evolutionary people call third-party punishment or third-party enforcement. So finally, let me just end with one other little finding that a lot of people find helpful in thinking about these things. Everything I've been talking about is obviously behavior, psychology, and you may want something more concrete. Well, of the over 200 species, of the roughly 200 species of non-human primates, 199 of them have eyes that look more or less like those of the chimp on the left part of your screen. They have white sclera, but they're very small and you can only see them when they look to the side. Whereas humans, as a species across all cultures, have these huge white sclera. And there's almost no individual differences. This suggests a very strong selections for it. There are very little individual differences, and there are almost no syndromes of people who have no whites of the eyes. So suggests a strong selective pressure. And one hypothesis is that these evolved precisely for being able to watch what another person is doing while you're collaborating. And not only that, but you're advertising your own gaze direction. If you're in a context with competitors, you don't want them to see where you're looking. When professional poker players put on sunglasses so nobody can see where they're looking. So if you're competing, you don't want people to see where you're looking. If you're cooperating, you do. So in a sense, you're advertising your gaze direction, and you would only do that in a cooperative context. So it might be, if we could ever, we need some candidate genes, but if we could get some candidate genes, we could find out when these whites of the eyes evolved, and that might give us some hints for this early collaboration as being when it emerged in human evolution. Our experiment with this, other people, some Japanese researchers established this morphological difference, and what we did is we showed that in a 2x2 design, that if the key cells are where I close my eyes and look up, and chimps follow that. And if I look up only with my eyes, chimps don't follow. So chimps are following the head, not the eyes. And children, it's the opposite. If you close your eyes and look up, these are 12 to 18-month-olds. If you close your eyes and look up, they don't look up. If you look with your eyes only, they do. So they're following the eyes. Chimps are following the head, kids are following the eyes. This doesn't tell you anything about an evolutionary context specifically, but it's at least suggestive that one of its functions is to be able to follow gaze direction rather than some other function, some other signaling function. So to conclude, I'll just say that human children are adapted for cooperation and culture in ways that other great apes are not. And I think we have empirical data showing that. As always, scientific experiments are criticizable, but I think the body of research shows that. And that these adaptations are fundamental to uniquely human processes of cognition, communication, cooperation, and even morality. So thank you very much.
I'll clap for everyone, since you won't be able to hear anyone else on the call. Thanks for that. We already have several questions, and so I'll just get started asking them. And people, please, submit your questions. Your screen is gone. Yeah. So.
Okay. Good. Okay.
So people, please submit your questions as we go through the question period. So the most popular one is from Harin. Maybe not the case with chimps, but would dogs collaborate with a joint goal. So for example, bring the ball for you to throw back. So is it really a unique human capacity? And I know there's a canine cognition center down there at Duke. And so what's the situation with dogs?
I try my best, but I may slip sometimes. I'm talking about is unique among apes, unique among primates. Dogs are a special case. We have some studies with dogs. Brian Hare, my colleague at Duke, has even more. And yes, dogs are highly cooperative with humans in all kinds of ways. But here's the key point that I would have you remember. Put two dogs in a room and you won't see anything special. This is not something dogs have evolved to do with other dogs. This is a special process of domestication. Chapter 1 of Darwin's Evolution of Species is about domestication. This is something humans have taken over the selective process, and they have selected dogs that will cooperate and communicate with them, and some of them special herding animals, hunting. So dogs have been selected precisely to be cooperative with humans. Dogs with other dogs, you don't see anything special. So yes, but that takes a very big asterisk beside it.
Okay. Thanks. So Ronan Tamari asks, I've heard arguments based, for example, on Franz de Waal's work that apes have theory of mind, shared attention, cultural transmission, and the ability to deceive, at least on some level. And according to these accounts, the only thing chimps seem to be missing is language. So I guess the question is your reaction to that account, and how do you compare your theory with those accounts that see language as the primary differentiator?
Well, there are many levels to answer it on, and I could go on for quite some time on this. But let me just say that all these things that chimps are doing, the theory of mind and the cultural transmission and all of that, they're doing some things, but they're not doing them like humans. And that's what our studies try to demonstrate. And you can't do this just from observation. You need to do experiments where you can really see the small difference. Now, with regard to language, I just think it means that Franz de Waal and others have not thought that much about language and what's required for language. You can't just throw in language as a magic bullet. Language requires a cooperation. It's the cooperative motives I showed you, of pointing just to share attention and so forth. It requires a common ground background. When I say the words he, she, and it, they assume a common ground that we both know together, that you're going to be able to identify the referent when I say the word it. And it requires conventional symbols. We both know the word. You've never heard me. I've never met you before, so you've never heard me say the word symbol, but I'm sure you understand it because you speak English. So this is a convention that we share, and I can count on that sharing. So we're sharing conventions. We're sharing background that allows us to interpret pronouns and fill in the blanks in communication. We're sharing attention to reference. Chimps don't engage in any triadic communication. They don't point triadically to reference. They don't iconically gesture. So language presupposes a whole host. I have a whole book on this, by the way, called Human Communication. Language presupposes a whole host of other social, cognitive, communicative, cooperative abilities. And if you invoke language without invoking those, then it just doesn't work. So I think that's a superficial analysis, is my opinion.
Okay. And so Eric Bialik asks, if joint attention combines or aligns individual perspectives, then should we think of joint attention as a coordination of perspectives?
Absolutely. Coordination has evolved over the years to be one of my favorite words. So in the book on, because of course it's a game theory coordination as well. Mm-hmm. And in my book on Becoming Human, I use the term mental coordination. That collaborating requires mental coordination, and the major tool for mental coordination is cooperative communication, pointing and sharing experience and whatnot. But that's what they're doing. It's a mental coordination. It's taking perspectives. It's negotiating perspectives. In the slide that I didn't show you, where the children are thinking together. And if you think of yourself in a lab meeting thinking together, we're essentially coordinating our perspectives, trying to come to common agreement on something as we do that. So I think coordinate, and as you know, all the studies of coordination with David Lewis in language, but also the original studies by Tomasello, coordination requires a kind of a recursive. I'm anticipating that you're anticipating that I'll anticipate what you'll do. So I actually think that recursion as a way of human cognitive skill actually evolved for this kind of mental coordination and language inheritance. So a lot of people have pointed out the recursion in language. I think that comes from the coordinating perspectives. So absolutely, coordination is a wonderful word.
Okay. Dan Swingley asks, Ray, the conventionality and enforcement results in 3-year-olds. I'm wondering why at 3 years and not earlier or later. If I remember Rakosi right, 2-year-olds showed imperative but not normative protest. Is this a real developmental shift or an incidental outcome from experimental particulars?
That's a very good question, Dan. Thank you. Read my book. I have a graph in the one of the last chapters trying to show all of the sources of evidence that this is a real shift at 3 years old. So you look across a bunch of different domains and you see a shift like that. And you're right that in the Rakosi study, 2 years old being imperative protest, it's unclear that that's got the normative component. I just say, don't do it. No, don't do it. But that can be, I don't want you to. But normative is not about what I want. Normative is you shouldn't do it. You ought not to do it, which is something higher than my personal opinion. So I think that normative, you can see it in all kinds of things. What I thought you were going to ask was about, if children are only understanding conventions, why are they using language so much earlier? And that's an interesting question because children are using linguistic symbols as tools from much, much before age 3, obviously, and getting quite sophisticated with it. But if you do an experiment where you ask them about where you see, do other people know this convention also? Do other people know it? Where you start seeing them understanding that other people know it, and perhaps somebody who doesn't speak the language doesn't know it. So understanding these symbolic tools as conventions that only some people know and some people don't, that's what you see at age 3. But still, that is still something we are clearly adapted for imitating the tool use of others. And I would actually analogize linguistic structures as tools that we use for communication, as Vygotsky did. And they're very good at using those tools, and they kind of understand how the tool works at age 3.
Okay. Nogavardi asks, is there a key gene that is mutated and is responsible for these collaborative friendly behaviors by affecting other genes? So I guess the broader question is, do we know anything about the genetic basis of any of these developmental transformations?
We don't, because you can't do experiments on humans that would be of the right type. But the closest thing we have is that all of these things I'm talking about are part of the autism spectrum disorder. So they're not very good at this kind of, they're not very motivated to share. Simon Baron-Cohen has shown that they mostly don't point just to share attention. They point when they want something, but they don't point just to say, oh, isn't that interesting? They're not great at, they're good at mimicking, but they're not good at learning new things from demonstrations. They're not good at collaborating with others. I actually have one study that we did that they're not very good at collaboration. And this motivation to share experience. And we obviously know that the autism spectrum disorder has a fairly strong genetic base. And so if I were a geneticist interested in this question, that's where I would go looking.
And if I may, I'd ask a follow-up as a neuroscientist. Do we know anything in parallel about brain changes that happen at 9 months or at 3 months that might, facilitate these transitions?
Well, I'm really out of my element there, so I don't really know. I mean, I know there's a lot of interconnections going on, a lot of myelinization going on, I just don't know. All your TPJs and your insulas and all that stuff, I just don't know when they're doing the thing. But, we know where to look, and there's not that much great work. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's not that much great neuroscientific work on children up to age 3 and beyond. We can't really do the kind of fMRI that we do with other kids. So I would say we need to get methods that we can use with younger kids to really answer that question.
Yeah. So Aya asks, what do children do if there are people with very different perspectives that aren't willing to collaborate with them? Do they keep trying to re-engage with them, or do they try to find someone else to work with? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that depends a lot on context. If you really need to get something done, then you persist and go to another partner if you have to. If it's just for fun, maybe you try to re-engage them. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, an interesting sort of twist on this is that some people have said to me, "Oh, I see your kids collaborating in your things there. You should come to my home and watch my 2 kids fight all the time." Is that siblings are an interesting case because they're kind of stuck without each other, and so there's a situation where they have to work it out because you're the only guy home today and no other friends are coming over. So I think siblings would be an interesting place to work out, where competition and cooperation have to find some kind of a they have to work out, negotiate cooperation and collaboration together somehow.
And Heather has popped up, so I think we've hit 1 o'clock. But if I can ask one last question, that when you start talking about recursion, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about throughout the talk is it seems like there's such a suite of behaviors that are uniquely human. Do you think that this is coming from several small changes in terms of cognitive skills and motivations that people have that other great apes don't have? Or do you think that there's some key cognitive ability or social motivation that, that there was a punctuated change between us?
This is why you have to study ontogeny. I believe there are 2 evolutionary changes that are emerging, and these are the 2 that I'm mentioning: the 9-month joint intentionality and the 3 years collective intentionality and culture and conventions. And I'm conceptualizing those as maturationally based biological capacities. But the word capacity means you have to practice it for it to come out. So I've been using this example from the very beginning. A child on a desert island brought up outside of any human contact would not develop any of these things. They would have this biological capacity, but the biological capacity needs social interaction to realize itself. It's like if you were born in total darkness, your eyes would atrophy. So if you're born outside of social interaction, your biological capacities won't realize into real things. So that's why you need to study ontogeny. You need both. You need the biological capacities, and I have a specific hypothesis about 2 of them, 1 at 9 months and 1 at 3 years. And you also need the social interaction to bring them into real life.
I think that's a great place to end. I'm mindful of everyone's time, and I am extremely thankful of you sharing your time with us today and the great talk.
Thank you again.
Thanks very much.
All right, so we'll be ending the session. The recording will be available shortly after we end today. Thanks to everybody for coming. Have a good weekend. And again, we will have our last talk of the fall semester at the same time next Friday. Until then.